This is the Moza Racing R12 wheelbase. It's the newest sim racing wheelbase from Moza Racing, and it fits into kind of an interesting space in the sim racing hardware landscape, something that myself and a few other reviewers have been calling for. So let's get into this review and I'll tell you what that is. All right, so as mentioned, this is the Moza Racing R12 wheelbase. This is a PC-only sim racing wheelbase from Moza Racing, retails for $590 and has 12 Newton meters of torque. And just off the top, I'll tell you that this was sent to me for free by Moza Racing for review. No money changed hands, and the words and thoughts are my own. So what gap does this fill in the sim racing hardware market? Well, it's interesting that this came out when it did, because not long after I had my podcast talk with Will from Boosted Media, we were talking about sort of spaces in the sim racing hardware market that should be filled. And one thing he mentioned, and when Will from Boosted Media talks about sim racing hardware, you listen, he was saying that there's so many hardware manufacturers focusing on 10 and under or 15 and up. And he said, well, why isn't there more options in the sort of 12 or 13 Newton meter range? And that's what this is. Again, coming in at 12 Newton meters of torque, it fills nicely in, or it fits nicely in that sort of gap in the sim racing hardware market. There are options out there, don't get me wrong. It's not like this is the first one to come in at 12 Newton meters, but it does nicely fit into a space where there isn't a lot of options. So as you can see, in terms of form, it's very, very similar to the R9 that you're used to, the R5 as well. The R5 is a lot thinner front to back. But in terms of the overall design, very, very similar to what we have come to expect from Moza Racing. No big surprises here. The one thing I did like is on the back, in addition to your usual power and USB connectivity, you also have these RJ spots, and those are for connecting up all the peripherals that Moza has come out with recently. They've come up with a handbrake, a shifter, and perhaps that's it. Am I missing anything? Oh yeah, the dash can go on there, and you can connect your pedals if you happen to be running Moza Racing pedals. So it's not that big. I'm not a huge fan of this design that Moza has gone with, and I would say the same thing to Fanatec. I think these kind of boxy designs aren't really for me. But broadly speaking, it's a functional design, we'll give it that. Comes with the USB cable and the power cable, and then you can add on peripherals as needed. The collar here, or not the collar rather, but the shaft here connecting to the motor. This is the Moza Racing quick release that I love so much. I think a lot of companies overcomplicate it. This is just a standard slide your wheel on, it finds it, and you are racing. It's wireless connectivity, and Moza Racing has always done a good job of it, and they do the same thing with the 12 Newton meter R12. So I've had this for about a month, actually. This is an interesting review. Generally, I get review products 1 to 2 weeks before, and I have to kind of try and fit it into my work schedule and hopefully find some time on the weekend to do the edits. This one I've had for like a month, so I've snuck it into a few videos. I didn't want to break embargo, but if you look back at some recent videos, you might see some kind of tricky camera work, and the reason is that I didn't want to include this and the other Moza product that I'll cover in a separate video. But yeah, this is the R12, and it seems to cover a lot of bases. As I say, I've had it for a month, very impressed with it, and I'll get into more of what I like and what I don't like in the final thoughts section. But broadly speaking, this is your R12 wheelbase, and again, $509, PC only, 12 Newton meters of torque. So it comes in at a great price for what you get, and slots into a segment of the sim racing hardware market that not a lot of companies are covering. So well done. So I'm going to get this mounted up. I'm going to fire it up in the software and give you a brief overview of the Moza Pithouse software, and then I'll drive it and talk to you about my experience. Then we'll come back to the table and do my final thoughts. Okay, so just a quick look at the Moza Pithouse software. As you can see, I've got it all connected. It found it no problem showing my R12 base and this FSR steering wheel. So if we go over into the wheelbase section, as you can see, you can configure just about anything you could want. I've done a force feedback settings video recently. You can check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about why I run the settings I do. But as you can see, we've got maximum steering angle, and we can set that all the way out to 2000 if we wished. There There's also road sensitivity, which is, you know, how much you want to feel from the roads, curbs, etc., like etc., etc. And you know, the strength overall, I've got it at 100%. That syncs with the maximum output torque limit, so you can set a limit if you're a little bit afraid of the 12 Newton meters of force. You can by all means dial this down to a setting that works for you to make sure that the forces don't overwhelm you. Going back here, we have any number of settings here. I won't get into details, but we can set, you know, sort of not responsiveness, but how the wheel sort of reacts via the wheelbase using these settings. And, you know, these are kind of in-game settings. We're talking about inertia and friction, damping. And then over here, we can set custom profiles here, you know, depending on what you want to feel in your particular sim. And then we can set custom curves here as, you know, whatever you want. Basically, you can set a curve for the force feedback you like to feel. Whoops, it's all messed up. There we go. I run linear personally. And then we can set, you know, some safety limits here. So, yeah, that's the Pit House software. I really like it. And one thing I forgot to do was, let's see, can you load? I guess I don't have, oh, there we go. So we can export this as a preset and just save it to our computer. As you can see, I've got a bunch saved already. So yeah, really allows you to do anything you could really want to customize with your Moza gear. And Pit House does a good job. All right, let's jump in game. All right, so time to test the R12 base. So all I've done for settings is use the same profile I used in my force feedback guide, and then turn the gain down in game a bit. So I'm only running 40% gain here, and even at that, it is feeling very, very strong. There's a lot of weight to it around that high-speed corner there. Driving an Indy car, so it's a fairly lively car, and there's a lot going on through the suspension and tires, and I can feel all of it. So going over these curbs here, just a very, very fine vibration. Went off into the grass there deliberately, and you can feel that, you know, banging of the suspension. So just massive amounts of detail here. Good weight through the corner, nothing too heavy. But if I go into understeer here, there, the wheel gets very light, and you know, there's a bit of a chatter as the tires go across the road surface. Just absolutely incredible. Feels so good. There's almost nothing missing versus my R21, and I don't say that lightly. I really mean that. The R21 still probably the best wheelbase I own, but this is not far behind at all. Just huge levels of detail. Really incredible what they're able to pull out of this 12 Newton meter wheelbase, especially at that $590 price point. Just extremely impressive. We'll go for one more lap here in this Indy car at Vallelunga here in Assetto Corsa. And again, nice and light to enter this complex. And then as I introduce more steering, as there's a lot of downforce at play now, I'm at high speed. I'm near 300 kilometers an hour, and I can feel that added weight through the wheelbase. Great definition, and just feels awesome to work with. Again, that curbing as I go off there, I'll put it into the grass here, and very strong bumps, and then as I returned and the steering kind of sorts itself out, I can feel every bit of that. So really just awesome. A little bit of understeer there. I can feel those tires working, trying to find their grip levels, and I'll try and not understeer this time. Perfect. So I could feel that. I could feel I was right at the cusp of understeer, but never let it really get away from me. Again, got to be careful here. There we go. Understeer. Knew I was coming in a bit hot. Felt it. Was able to modulate my braking in kind. Just tremendous detail, and then I lost it completely. That time I did not get my understeer feel perfect, but yeah, anyway, you guys get the point. Absolutely fantastic feeling through this wheelbase. Really loving the Moza Racing R12. Again, I've had this for about a month, so this is not shocking to me, but just kind of talking about it and, you know, understanding what I'm feeling a little bit better, or not understanding, but you know, focusing more on what I'm feeling is, yeah, just really makes me appreciate this thing. And I think Moza have really outdone themselves with this R12, and I think a lot of people are going to be happy if they can get their hands on an R12 wheelbase, because this is phenomenal. Top 3 wheelbases I own for sure, and I don't say that lightly. Okay, so time for my final thoughts on the Moza Racing R12 wheelbase. I'll go through good, things I like, neutral, things I'm just kind of okay with, and bad, things I don't like about this wheelbase. And starting off with the good, the first thing, of course, is the force feedback feel. This thing feels phenomenal. I hope it came through in the driving section. But it's incredible. You're getting up to the sort of rare level of force feedback. I do own the R21 from Moza Racing. That's my most powerful wheelbase, and the level of detail you get from that is incredible. And this R12 gets darn close. It feels really, really good. More than enough power, I would say, for 99% of users, and the force feedback detail is fantastic. So yeah, huge power, great detail, and overall very, very satisfying to drive with. And then of course we talk about the price, $590. I'm not completely, ignorant to the fact that $590 for a video game controller without even a wheel is a lot of money. But at the same time, I will say, if you're in this market and searching, to find something with this much power, you're probably looking closer to the $1,000 mark. And now granted, when you add a wheel on, it's going to get closer to that mark. But I think broadly speaking, for something that, has 50% more power than a Fanatec CSL-DD with the boost kit, I mean, yeah, that's a pretty impressive price. Moza has continued to impress me with their prices over the years, and this one just continues that on. Just very, very impressive. And I would also say the third thing is the software, the Pithouse software. I think it's getting to be among the best pieces of software out there for wheel tuning. It's, got some room for improvement, but overall I would say it's a very, very good software. And I did do a tuning guide recently, so you can check out my settings if you own an R5, and you can probably just adjust gain if you own an R9 or are thinking about this R12. But Pithouse software is very, very good. And of course, the cool and quiet operation of this thing. So even under extended use, I used this for, I think, a 3-hour endurance race that I was working on, and it was warm to the touch, but nothing close to hot. Like it's not like I had to take my hand away or anything. It just felt warm. You could tell it was on. You could tell it was in use. And the whole time it just stayed perfectly quiet. There was no issues with, loud operation, no issues with it getting hot, again, even under multiple hours of use. So very impressive on that front. And also, speaking of impressive, the quick release. Again, I think a lot of companies kind of overcomplicate the quick release system. Even Fanatec, as long as Fanatec's been around, I still feel like they haven't got their quick release right. We're supposed to be getting a QR2, is that right? From Fanatec soon, quote unquote, but we don't have it yet. And Moza Racing from the start has really nailed the quick release. It's a mechanical system very similar to what you would find on, a race car or something like that. And it just works. It just works. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just use a very simple ball bearing style system and you're good to go. I've never had any problems. There's no wiggle in this wheel whatsoever. And well, of course, every wheel has a bit of wiggle, but overall, it's just a very solid system, and I don't know why other companies complicate it. Just do what Moza Racing does. These guys have had it right from the jump. And speaking of that quick release, what do you connect to it? You connect wheels, and there's a growing line of wheels offered from Moza Racing, and they do a really good job of coming in. Much like the R12 is value packed, I would say the wheel lineup is value packed as well, from the FSR, which is an expensive wheel but has a built-in screen, and I don't think there's many wheels you can find in that price range that have the built-in screen. I think the GS wheel is a fantastic wheel if you don't want the screen, but you still want all the carbon fiber, magnetic shifters, Alcantara grips, blah, blah, blah. There's the CS wheel, which is a very solid round wheel. So there's a lot of options out there. It's a growing lineup, and I'm happy to see that. So it's not like you're buying this and have one option. You're buying this and have a few really solid options. And of course, if we flip it around back here, you have connectivity options. You don't have to run a whole bunch of disparate USB connections if you're in the Moza Racing ecosystem. All you need is this, and it's going to function as a hub for all your gear. So you're down to a single USB connection, which is really, really good, and I think they've done a good job with that. I know they sell the hub separately if you buy a wheelbase that doesn't have it, like the R21, but it's good to know that it's built in here, so it really just covers a lot of bases and makes things a lot simpler. And finally, in the good category, something probably most of you won't care about, but a Moza branded power supply. So previously the power supplies from Moza, they did have Moza branding on the back, but you had to look for it. But it always felt like, you know, they were just sort of cobbling pieces together from different manufacturers to make a cohesive system, something to sell you. But this one being Moza branded just kind of ties it all together, and I think they've done a good job with it. It lights up too. It's kind of fading because I've got it unpowered, but yeah, this lights up nice and bright green and shows you that you are in fact using a Moza Racing wheel and wheelbase and power supply. So I don't know, simple thing, but I like it. Into the neutral now, and things I'm just kind of okay with. One, I've already talked about this, but the design, yeah, granted, I like the fact that they wrote their name there, and they did put a little R12. Hopefully I'm pointing at the right side here, I can't see, but they did put a little R12 there so you can tell it from the R9. So there's a bit of style, and you know, you got these sort of, I don't know what you'd call them, fins running along the side. Yeah, it looks like a heat sink almost, but I don't think it functions as a heat sink. But overall, I just think this is quite a generic styling, and like the R21, I think is nicely styled. But when you get into the R5, R9, R12, that styling becomes very generic. And to me, it just kind of undersells what this is, because this is a phenomenal piece of gear, but it looks pretty plain Jane to me. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the styling. And then also in the neutral category, the notchy feel. Keep in mind, it goes away as soon as you power up, but this is probably the notchiest feeling wheel I've ever owned, and that's really saying something. You get into like the Logitech G Pro, and that thing just turns like it's, I don't know what, but just perfectly smooth. This one is ultra notchy. I've never felt a wheelbase this notchy before. But again, it goes away as soon as you power it up, but it's just kind of off-putting that it's that notchy. So I don't know if, you know, mechanically there's things to overcome in there, that maybe it's, you know, not using all of its power. I don't know, I'm speculating here, but it just seems like if it's this notchy, there would be some trade-off for that. But again, once you're actually powered up, that goes away and it's a perfectly smooth wheel, but it is just kind of a thing that I'm not crazy about. And now the bad things I don't like about the Moza Racing R12. I will start with the fact that the default profiles aren't that great. And yeah, it kind of undersells the wheel, and that bothers me on a lot of fronts. I've always believed, whether you're talking game, whether you're talking hardware, that the producer or publisher or developer or whomever, builder, should set you up for success. So the default profiles, in my opinion, should be a lot better from Moza. I've had products in the past from Moza where I thought they were pretty good out of the box rather, for certain games, but overall, I think it needs improvement, and it feels like something that they could even crowdsource. Like, I feel like if they're able to collect any data from users and kind of see where the average user lands, but if they're not collecting data, then I would say, you know, hire somebody who's got a good touch with force feedback, and let them dial in some settings, and maybe even market it. Maybe even put it on your website as, here is the whatever Sim Racing 604 profile, here is the boosted media profile, here is, you know what I mean? But just help people get to get a better feeling with this sooner, because there's a lot of potential in this wheel, and depending on the game, depending on how you like your force feedback, you might not love it out of the box. I find that there are some somewhat significant adjustments I have to make for certain sims. And the second thing I don't like is the lack of console support. And I want to be clear here that if this worked with my PlayStation, this would be the only wheel I run. Currently, I go back to my Fanatec CSL-DD, or actually GT-DD Pro often, because it supports console and I like to drive on Gran Turismo. I don't have that option here with the PC-only R12. Now, I know that a lot of people will say, console is for gamers, you know, real sims run on PC. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just saying that there's a huge, huge market for console users that this is not able to reach. And I'm serious in saying that this is one of the best wheelbases I own, and I would recommend this to anybody, probably over the CSL-DD. And I don't say that lightly, but I would probably recommend this over the CSL-DD without many qualifications if it was console compatible. But the fact is, you are PC landlocked with this wheelbase, and that's an unfortunate thing. So hopefully in the future, future Moza comes out with something console compatible to break into that market and give us as consumers a bit more options in terms of what we play with their gear. In summary, I think this is an absolutely phenomenal piece of gear. This has entered my top 3 without a doubt. It's a phenomenal piece of gear. $590. Again, I'm not saying that's chump change. I'm saying that if you're in that market and you know, looking at the CSL-DD with the boost kit or the GT-DD Pro, you know, which comes in at 8 Newton meters, or you're considering the R9 for I think $440, and you can afford that little bit more to get this R12, you're going to be blown away. This thing is fantastic. What a great wheelbase this is, and in my opinion, a great value. That wheel lineup keeps expanding, so there's more ways to play with the R12, and just overall, it's a tremendous piece of gear, and definitely right up there with the best I have ever tried. And again, this would get my full recommendation over the CSL-DD if it were console compatible. If you don't play on console and never plan to play on console, I would say give serious consideration to the R12 over the CSL-DD, because I'm in love with this thing. I think it's fantastic. 50% more power than that CSL-DD. It's going to give you a little bit more detail. It's going to give you a little bit more power, a little bit more realism, and I think it deserves serious consideration. I could hardly be happier. So well done to Moza Racing. Incredible product. I hope this sells a lot of units, because I think people are going to be very happy with this wheelbase. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next review.